After 8 years, the Nintendo Switch finally has a successor, the Nintendo Switch 2. Sporting the same hybrid form factor as the Switch, Switch 2 is bigger, better, and more powerful, which is something that fans have been waiting for quite a long time now. Now, there's already been loads of unboxings for Switch 2 on YouTube already, and first impressions, that kind of thing. I want to do something a little bit different for my video today. I'll take you through the first 4 or 5 days that I spent with Nintendo Switch 2, sharing everything I've discovered, things I like, things I'm not so keen on, and everything in between. These are the first days of Nintendo Switch 2. So just a bit of context for my expectations going in. When the Switch 2 was revealed, I honestly wasn't sure how excited I was. Yes, I was really excited for a new Mario Kart, and of course I want to play a lot of the first-party Nintendo games, but a lot of the third-party games that they announced, I'd already played on something else, and I didn't really care too much for the social features that have been added. I knew I'd get one eventually though, so in the end I decided I'd keep half an eye out for a pre-order, and if I got the chance then I'd go for it, but if not, then no harm done and I'd just get one later. All of this is just to sort of set the scene and say that I'm not somebody who's just going to love any Nintendo console no matter what they do, but at the same time I'm not a Switch 2 hater either. I think I kind of sit somewhere in between. So release day rolls around 5th of June 2025 and I spent the day working, which probably isn't what you expected me to say, but I had the Switch 2 on pre-order and I knew it would get delivered probably mid-afternoon. I didn't have any kind of midnight release that I went to, I was just waiting for it to be delivered. So really it was almost a normal day for me for probably the first 3/4 of it. Finally though, it arrived and the first thing I did was put on a screen protector. Very exciting, I know, but I hate scratches on screens. The Switch one, you could get scratches just by putting it in the dock. So, you know, I knew that I needed to get a screen protector for me. This one actually was really easy to fit. It had one of those little plastic rectangles to get the positioning just right. It probably the easiest screen protector that I've ever put on. I'll put a link in the description for anybody who hasn't got one yet and is after one. So after that, it's on to setup. The process wasn't too bad actually. I did do the full system transfer from my Switch 1 to my Switch 2. It took about 10 minutes overall, but you do need both systems to be plugged in, so just watch out for that. I had to go and find another charger and I wasn't close to 2 different plugs, so it was a little bit of a pain. But then you're in, and it really is kind of like nothing has changed. Your Switch 2 starts to download all of the Switch 1 games you had installed. You know, all of your system information is transferred, your playtimes are all transferred over. Everything is almost basically exactly the same when you first boot it up. Now, I actually ended up deleting all of the Switch 1 games that I had previously installed because I kind of wanted a bit of a fresh start with my Switch 2. But yeah, I think this is a good feature for everyone who wants a seamless transition between the Switch 1 and Switch 2. Now, just talking about the hardware itself, when you first get it out of the box, the Switch 2 does feel quite a bit bigger in the hands. It feels a little bit more comfortable to hold in terms of like actually getting hold of the console, but I am still missing the grip of something like a Steam Deck or a PlayStation Portal. I might end up still getting a grip for the Switch 2 eventually. Now, of course, the downside of it being bigger means it's also heavier and a bit less portable. I felt like the Switch 2 is now a console that you can't just take around anywhere with you due to the size, and also it's a bit harder to hold out away from your body, and it's a bit more comfortable to hold closer towards you. But then the bigger screen is a huge plus for me. I do wish it was OLED, but even so, it's still bright and colorful, and the improved resolution is noticeable in games right away, and it just feels very smooth. I think that's that refresh rate. It's very smooth to look at. There is a fair bit of bezel on it though, which I think is a bit of a shame, but that's only a small complaint. Talking of the Joy-Cons then, I like the snap of the Joy-Cons into the main console. It's honestly really quite satisfying. I am a little concerned about the long-term survivability of these controllers with that sharp snap happening if you do it many times, but we'll see. I'm sure they've tested this a bunch. One thing I wasn't too keen on with the Joy-Cons from the Switch 1 was that they did wiggle on those rails, even when they were brand new, but especially as time went on. But with Joy-Con 2, those magnets seem to really hold them in place, and overall I'm just impressed with the Joy-Con 2 in general. Even using them in the sort of grip as a separate controller, I think that feels good, and I don't feel the need to immediately go and buy a Pro 2 controller, which is kind of what I did when I got my Switch 1. I immediately wanted to get a Pro controller. Anyway, with work out of the way, I played a few races of Mario Kart just on my own, and then I went into a Mario Kart World live stream where we played for a couple of hours, and I had a lot of fun. I've been a big Mario Kart fan for a long time now, and I've said said on this channel that I used to play it most weeks with friends, especially when all of those DLC tracks came out for Mario Kart 8. We were playing all the time trying to get those new tracks on rotation. I'm not going to go really in depth on each of the games that I talk about in this video. I'll just talk about a few sort of impressions of them. Mario Kart, I think, never looked better than in Mario Kart World, but I'm still coming to terms with the world choice. I am having loads of fun with the game, but to me Mario Kart was driving around a track 3 times, and when doing online races it's now really rare for this to occur. Sometimes you can pick a track that isn't linked to one you just did and you'll get to do 3 laps, but most of the time the way the races work is that you drive from the track that you were on to the new track and then you just do 1 lap of the new track. And sometimes the world in between is kind of cool, but sometimes it's a bit bland. But either way, racing across the world comes at the expense of the tracks, and that was kind of the iconic thing in Mario Kart to me. I'm still playing it loads, so I'm still deciding on this, but that was just kind of my first impressions, was that I wanted to have a way to drive around the tracks more. On the other side of things, I am enjoying Knockout Tour way more than I expected, and I think this actually is where that open world really shines. It's one really long race across a huge section of the world. It incorporates a bunch of different tracks, I think about 6 of them, and you survive as long as you can. You have to get through the gates in a certain position or you get knocked out. Now, I've played both modes quite a bit online now. The chaos of 24 racers is definitely there, but in Knockout Tour, as you eliminate players, it does settle down a little bit. So overall, I'm not sure if Mario Kart World beats Mario Kart 8 for me, but I will always enjoy that core racing of Mario Kart, so I'm having a great time playing this. Now, of course, technically Thursday was the first day of the Nintendo Switch 2, but for me, I didn't get it until most of the way through the day, so Friday really felt like the first day of Switch 2 for me. It was the start of my time off work, the console was right there as soon as I wanted to play it, I didn't have to wait for a delivery, and I'd enjoyed Mario Kart a lot, but I hadn't had a lot of time to look around the system and try out lots of other things, so it felt like it was going to be a good day getting to grips with the Switch 2. I'd had a little look in the eShop the day before. I just had some quick glances, and straight away you can tell that it's faster, but I went in there properly on Friday and I was having a proper look around, and there are a few extra features that I really like. Firstly, when you hover over a game, it starts to play either a video or it will start flicking through screenshots of the game. This is so good, especially if you're just browsing and you just want a quick idea of what a game will be like. You don't have to click into it and then come back out of it. Hovering over Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, for example, it starts to play the recent trailer from the Switch 2 upgrade. I like this feature, I think it's a really good one. Still in the eShop now, the search function also has a played by friends section, which is nice, and there is also a new For You section. I like the idea of this, recommendations that are given based on your interests, and it refreshes once a week. You can just scroll through a bunch of games, almost like TikTok style I guess, and it'll start the trailers for you. I will say my first week of recommendations weren't that on target, but I think this will probably improve over time though as we buy and play more games. Finally, it's nice and easy to tell which games are Switch 2 in the eShop and which ones are Switch 1 because there's a banner now for Switch 2, and so I decided to buy Fantasy Life I on Switch 2. I've been thinking about getting this game anyway for the past couple of weeks. I liked the first one a lot on 3DS, but I was struggling to decide between playing on Steam Deck or PS5, but a Switch 2 release was kind of perfect. It just felt right to play this on a Nintendo handheld, just like the first game. I've been really enjoying Fantasy Life so far. I actually ended up playing it for about 3.5 or 4 hours on that day, which it might not sound like loads to some people, but for me to play the same game for that long in one day, it's pretty rare for me. It's got a lot of charm to it. I'm enjoying the story quite a bit so far. I really like the Bone Dragon. There's also just so many quests between story quests, each job you can pick up that has progression quests. There's smaller quests for NPCs, quests to build up your town, dailies. Each island has its own board of things to achieve. You could sink a lot of time into this game for sure. I kind of think that my wife would like to play this one as well. It's just a shame that you can't play the whole game through in co-op multiplayer. You have to do the story on your own. There's only certain things that you can do together. One thing that I noticed on Friday while playing Fantasy Life is that load times were super quick. So Fantasy Life, it has loading screens with a tooltip, and sometimes I couldn't even read the whole tooltip by the time the game loaded, which I was really impressed by. And then when I noticed that, I sort of started noticing in other games, it seems to be the case for a lot of stuff I've tried on Switch 2 so far. Loading times are pretty good, and I really like that. So we also played some split screen Mario Kart together on Friday as well, and this was a lot of fun, but it also meant that we tried out using the Joy-Cons on their sides to play because that's the only controller that I have at the moment. They're a bit more comfortable than Joy-Con 1, but still not what I would call ideal for a really long gaming session. It works in a pinch, maybe if you're playing a few tours in Mario Kart, or maybe something like if we get Mario Party, where you don't have to be playing with the controller all the time. You can put it down when other people are taking their turn. I just think if you end up playing lots of split screen on Switch 2, I do feel like I might end up buying another controller, whether that's a Pro controller or more Joy-Cons. It's much more comfortable to play with a full controller. Now, all of the gameplay that I did on Friday was a mix. I would play some in handheld, and then I'd go back into playing docked and back and forth. And that kind of meant that I didn't get a great idea of the battery life, except to say that while docked, it charged enough that I got through the handheld gaming sessions absolutely fine without needing to go and find a plug. So playing back and forth between docked and handheld, something that I noticed is the new design of the Joy-Con actually makes it so easy to remove and attach them when the Switch is docked. It's only a small thing, but on Switch 1, if you put your Switch into the dock, you then have to use two hands to slide the Joy-Con off the rail. Whereas with Switch 2, you can just use one hand on each Joy-Con, pinch the button with one finger, and then just pull off to the side with the Joy-Cons, and you remove both at the same time. So that was Friday. Saturday, I did another stream looking at the performance upgrades of both Pokemon Violet and Breath of the Wild. Just before I talk about the performance of these games, one thing on the Switch 2 that I actually struggle with a little bit when trying to play Breath of the Wild is virtual game cards, and I don't really like this system. It actually took me a second to figure out how to get the Breath of the Wild Switch 2 version. I knew that I had it through the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass, so I went onto the store and I downloaded it from the store, but then when I tried to play it, it still said I couldn't play. And it turned out that when I deleted all of my Switch 1 games that I transferred over, I was actually removing all of the virtual game cards from the device. So I had to go back and reload the Breath of the Wild virtual game card in order to launch the Switch 2 version. But once we got that out of the way, we were onto the performance upgrades, and I have to say I'm really impressed with these. Pokemon Violet feels like a totally different game. The frame rate is so smooth now. There's a lot less pixelation of the textures as well to help the overall look. It's obviously had a resolution bump. Unfortunately, the actual textures themselves are still pretty rubbish though. Some of them are just like one block of color. That hasn't changed at all. So it does look better, but don't expect it to look completely different because that kind of stuff just doesn't change. Overall though, I think it does feel so much better to play, and I actually think I might do another playthrough of Pokemon Violet on my Switch 2. And Breath of the Wild is very similar. It also has both a higher resolution and increased frame rates, and it looks really good and it feels really good to play on the Switch 2. It obviously doesn't have the same issue with bad textures, not to the same scale as Pokemon Violet anyway, so the game just looks great on Switch 2. And one thing that I didn't think about is how much nicer it feels to do things like aim a bow in Breath of the Wild at 60 frames, so that is really good as well. If you ever wanted to do another Breath of the Wild playthrough, this is the way to do it. Now, just because I had a bit of extra time to stream on Saturday, we also tested out Mario Odyssey because that was also supposed to have an upgrade, but Mario Odyssey is the one of these three games. Mario Odyssey is the one that I didn't really notice as much of an upgrade for. I did Google it and it says improved visuals, which is a bit vague. I think it has had a resolution bump. It also says increased frame rate, which did confuse me a bit because I thought that Switch 1 had Mario Odyssey at 60 frames most of the time anyway. So yeah, it still is a great game, but just I didn't really notice much of an improvement with this one. And so we go on to Sunday and Monday, my last days with the Switch 2 before I had to go back to work, and I continued to play these same games that I talked about already, but I did pick up something new that I haven't talked about, Cyberpunk 2077. I went back and forth quite a lot about whether to actually get this game. On one hand, I already played through it. I own it on PlayStation and I own it on Steam. I don't need a third copy of Cyberpunk, but on the other hand, I don't own the DLC, which is bundled into the Switch 2 version, and I was just so curious to see how it would run on Switch. I played quite a few games on my Switch at this point, but nothing that I felt really would push the hardware to its limit, and I wanted to see what the Switch would be able to do with it. So I ordered a physical copy, and I figured that, if I didn't play it, then maybe down the line I could at least trade it in. I have to say, I am really impressed with Cyberpunk on the Switch 2. The graphics look way better than I expected them to look, especially in quality mode when you're playing docked. I'm sure if you ran it side by side next to the PS5 or Series X versions, there would be differences to see, but just going into the game without too many expectations, I was pretty shocked actually. DLSS must play a big part here, and it seems to have paid off. Handheld mode is also quite impressive, but not quite as good. I set it to performance mode initially, which has a slight reduction in graphics quality. It's kind of hard to tell when you're playing handheld that those graphics do change, but then the 40 FPS becomes enabled due to that 120Hz VRR screen. Now, while the change change in graphics quality doesn't feel too bad going into performance mode in handheld, you do notice the change in resolution. I did read that Cyberpunk targets 1080p docked, but only 720p in handheld mode, even if you do have it on quality, and I think you can tell, which is a bit of a shame. I still think it's impressive that they got this running on the Switch 2 at all, but it does seem like maybe the experience is better docked than handheld. Cyberpunk also gave me an excuse to finally try out the mouse controls on the Switch 2. Now, they felt a little bit awkward at first, but I slowly got used to it. I've not played these loads. The only thing I will say is that the Joy-Con, when held on its side, is quite thin, and it's not really shaped to the palm of your hand. So I can see this getting pretty uncomfortable during longer play sessions. So there we are. Those were my first days with the Nintendo Switch 2. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what to expect when you get your console and when you first start to play it. I have to say, we're still less than a week into the Switch 2's life, but I am excited for what the next years are going to bring for this console. There are some features that I haven't got to play yet. I don't know anyone else who has a Switch 2 yet, so I haven't had a go with Game Chat, and I've also not tried GameCube games yet. I also didn't talk at all about how some Switch 1 games just seem to run better on Switch 2, even those games without a patch. It seems that this is because a lot of them have unkept frame rates, and so they can immediately take advantage of the more powerful system. Games like Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity are smoother now, and I think it's going to be fun going back through some of our favorites from the Switch 1 days and running them on Switch 2. Cyberpunk has also got me wondering just what else this system can do. If this is a release day game, then what will things look like when the devs have had a few more years with the hardware, and what will Nintendo do with a little more power to play with? I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, I tried to do something a little bit different so that you weren't just watching another of the same videos about the Nintendo Switch 2. I know there's loads on YouTube now. I'd love to hear what you think about the Switch 2. Did you get one? And if so, are you enjoying it? And if you haven't picked up a Switch 2 yet and you want to know anything about the console, please let me know down in the comments and I will try my best to answer any questions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.